Beyond Survival is the official podcast of Waymaker Institute. Our desire is to equip you as a follower of Jesus to thrive. Each episode reveals how the gospel impacts the entire human experience for the advancement of God's kingdom. Ultimately, Jesus' promise of abundant life means we are meant to go beyond survival. So, let's jump in with today's episode.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to the Beyond Survival podcast, which is, by the way, the official podcast of branding right there, Waymaker Institute. And if you're not watching on YouTube, you totally missed that. But anyways, we're really thankful that you're here. The whole premise of this podcast is having conversations around this idea that as followers of Jesus, oftentimes we can find ourselves in survival mode. And it's just the way that we've kind of coined this, but it could be a lot of different things. But we are talking to people on what it looks like to actually thrive as a follower of Jesus, or to experience abundant life that Jesus says that he offers us. And it's really fascinating, man. The conversations, in fact, we are a year through this officially, and the conversations we've had over the last year have been unbelievable. I honestly can't believe some of the people we've been able to connect with and hear their story, their personal stories. We've talked with pastors, theologians, authors, communicators, my friends. I don't even know. It's just crazy. And I'm really excited about today's conversation because, oh my goodness, you want to talk about a story of survival, like in the physical sense, right? And just the parallels of the physical and the spiritual and the emotional, and we're going to get all into that. But we have Emily here. I'm with Emily Ostroski, which is Polish, correct?
Yes.
And you grew up in Poland, right?
Nope.
No, okay. Sorry. But no, we're really excited. You're part of our church, and you're here today because I believe you have a story to tell. And you've been telling it. Actually, before we get into that, we also have Emily, which by the time this comes out, your episode will have released. Yeah. And so people will know you. But in case you missed the episode, this is Emily, who's my friend. And she is, and I know you'll take this the right way, but my second favorite O'Donnell.
That's fair. You're my second favorite club, so.
Hey, at least we're on the same page. But anyways, this is Emily, and if you listened to the last episode, right, Trisha? Good. Anyways, if you've ever recorded a podcast, you have to like live in both the future and the now and the. Anyways, it's really confusing, but I think I got that right. And let's jump in. So, Emily.
Yes.
Just real quick, like in a minute or less, who is Emily?
Emily. I, by day, work as the Director of Student Activities at University of Lynchburg.
Yep.
So
formerly known as Lynchburg College.
Lynchburg College,
yep.
Yes. We still have signs that say Lynchburg College, so it's okay. You could call it either, really.
Okay, sounds good.
I plan events and such. When I'm not at work, I'm usually hanging with friends. I love video games, and I love the outdoors, cooking, mostly just doing stuff.
Yeah, sounds good. Speaking of video games, I'm not personally a gamer, but can we talk about the best video game out right now, which is Hogwarts Legacy?
Yeah, I know that it's very popular. I have an Xbox One, and it hasn't come out yet for Xbox One.
It has not, no.
So no Hogwarts for me.
Okay, it's okay.
Yeah.
The episode's now over. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, so we're gonna go right into it because I think a lot of it something happened in the fall of 2022. Is that
kind of winter?
Winter,
yeah.
Okay. And so let's go in. Take us there. What happened last year?
Yeah. So right after Thanksgiving, actually on the way home from visiting my family, I got what I thought was a head cold, the normal headache, stuffy nose. I was like, oh, great, weather is making me sick. And had that for a few days, and it kind of moved down to my chest, and my throat got really sore. And so I was having some difficulty breathing, and I called up my mom, who was a nurse, and I was like, hey, I'm feeling pretty unwell, and I also was starting to get, like, tingly in my body, like my arms and my legs. And I was like, I don't know if this is normal. And she was like, well, you've been sick for a couple of days. Like, maybe your electrolytes are off. If you just go to the local hospital, they can do blood work, check out stuff, and give you, like, IV fluids or whatever. So went to Lynchburg General a couple days after I started having those symptoms, and they told me that I had mono and pneumonia. And I was like, oh, what a combo.
Yeah.
They gave me some medicine for the pneumonia to kind of clear up my congestion. And then for the mono, they were like, just sleep and rest and drink water, and it'll cure itself.
Mm-hmm.
And if you get worse, come back. And I was like, okay. And so did what sick people did, went home, laid in bed, and, like, died for a couple days.
What, did you have a show of choice during that time that you can, like,
I
admit
don't
to
even-
on a podcast?
I don't even remember. I
Okay,
think
that's
I watched a bit of New Girl, but it was kind of like that haze of, like, sickness where you're like, I don't really know what's happening right now.
New Girl. Are you familiar?
Yeah. Yeah.
Good show.
Yeah.
It's funny.
Yeah.
Emily, what is it about New Girl? Just real quick.
It's just quirky.
Okay.
And I mean, Zooey Deschanel is wonderful. So
Okay.
yeah.
There it is. I probably won't watch it, but I trust.
That's fair.
I trust you guys.
That's fair.
It's all right. It's all right. We won't knock you for it.
Yeah.
So a couple days, I wasn't feeling well, and I did notice that I was starting to get worse. So, like I said, I had that body tingling in my arms and my legs, and it kind of spread to my whole body. And so the day after I went to the hospital, I was like normal sick week where, like, you're walking around your house and you're like, oh, this is kind of hard, like, I'm tired. By the next day, I was kind of holding the walls of my apartment to help. And the day after that, I woke up, like, in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, and I stood up from my bed, and my legs just, like, collapsed under me because they couldn't hold up my body because they were so weak. And at that point, I was like, okay, this probably isn't good. This has been, like, going downhill. So I called my mom again. She was like, yeah, you should go back to the hospital. And so I ended up driving up to UVA, and it was there that they told me that they suspected I had something called Guillain-Barré syndrome. And basically what that disease is, it's an autoimmune disease where your immune system attacks your nervous system. So you start to lose motor function, you get tingly. What happened next was kind of crazy.
Okay.
Over the course of 3 weeks, I went from totally normal Thanksgiving living life to, at my worst, I was in a hospital bed, couldn't move my arms, couldn't move my legs. I had a feeding tube because even the muscles that I was, like, swallowing with weren't strong enough to eat, like, normal food. And my breathing got really bad. I was, like, whisper talking. And it was a crazy shift. I would have to have nurses come in to, like, shift me every few hours because if I started, like, leaning this way, I couldn't pick my body back up to sit straight. And it was just the rapid decline is kind of the scary part because Guillain-Barré is a rare disease. Only about 20,000 people get it a year, and it's something that you can die from if you get to a point where your lungs and your heart muscles get attacked, then you can die. So it was kind of unknown of, okay, this is getting worse. We know eventually it'll stop because that's the progression of the disease. It kind of attacks for a period of, like, 3 to 4 weeks, and then it stops. But in that time, depending on how bad that attack is, you could end up with some pretty severe or permanent damage.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Mm. Now, with you talking about just the rapid progression of this, talk about where you were, like, so you're struggling physically, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where were you in those times, like emotionally, and then like spiritually, like unpack those.
Yeah, absolutely. I think both of those were huge areas during that time. Obviously, the physical was very visible, but mentally, overall, I had a lot of joy. There were obviously times where it was very discouraging. I especially, if you had asked me before Thanksgiving, like my worst nightmare, I would have said something like being stuck in a bed, unable to move with a feeding tube, which was quite literally my life for 3 weeks. And so there were times where I was anxious or discouraged, especially at nighttime, like, because visitors would leave and it'd just be like in a hospital room and you're like, I can't move. This is not fun. But emotionally, I had only moments like that. And for most of the time, I actually had a lot of joy. And I think a lot of that came from, one, my faith. I love worship music, and so I made a playlist at Guillain-Barré syndrome is GBS, and so the playlist was G-bops, and I like capitalized the GBS.
Awesome.
Oh my gosh, that's great.
That's so good.
Yeah, I had my like all the worship songs that I would play like when I started to get anxious, and I just would feel the peace. And I think the other huge thing that helped with just maintaining joy was community. I had a crazy amount of texts and people who would come visit, and my family came. And I was at the point where like my hands weren't strong enough to type on my phone or like hold my phone, but I would like see the text coming in, and I'd have like my sister come out. I'd be like, we have to text people back, and she'd be sitting next to me, like I'd be telling her what to write, because there were just like the overwhelming flood of love and prayers, and hearing people praying for me from across the country and in different countries that I'd never met. So there were for sure moments of fear and discouragement, and like not knowing what was going to happen next. But I think the majority of the time that was like on the back burner, and I was just overwhelmed with the love and joy. And then I think spiritually, I've never been through like a huge moment in my life where like, oh, that was a big turning point. Or like I was in the deepest, darkest valley, you know, and I think experiencing that, there's just a different connection with God when, like I said, I love worship music, and so I'm listening to songs where it talks about like Jireh, like in every circumstance, I'll be content. It's like in this circumstance where I can't eat, I can't move my limbs, like I'm still content because I have God. And so I think there's just a new level of trusting God, relying on Him, and just knowing that He's got me in everything.
Yeah, I think it's really cool. Just, you know, the title of this podcast being Beyond Survival, and I've wondered a lot about, you know, the parallels between like physically surviving and spiritually surviving, and like physically thriving and spiritually thriving, and you kind of have this inverse situation where like physically, like all you can do in this moment is survive. Like that's all you can do. But to see in spite of that, like spiritually, like it sounds like you were thriving in this season where everything else is stripped away, but you're getting to experience God in a completely new and real and deep way. I just think that's really beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like you said, like when other things are stripped away, it almost made like, oh, I didn't have the work distractions and I didn't have video games and friends. It was like, I am laying in this bed and I can either sit here and be angry and be scared, or I can sit here and look at the good things and look at the love and look at how God is using me with these nurses who I get to tell jokes to and stuff like that. And it was a cool, really cool experience.
When like in those moments, especially when maybe you're like left alone, like to your own like thoughts and so forth, what did you like contemplate the fact of like, hey, like if my heart and my lungs are attacked, like I could die, I could lose my life. What was that thought process, or how far into that did you go? And yeah, I'm just curious of, because most of like the reality is that most of us don't wake up on most days with the reality of death before us, right? Like we kind of wake up and we're like, oh, like I'm good, like my heart's beating, blood's flowing, and honestly that can we lose the sense of like value of life and just how precious it is. So I'm just if you could take us into like your thought process or what that looked like for you.
Yeah, I think the times that I got the most like nervous about like the life and death situation was as my breathing got worse. There's a thing called a vital capacity, which is basically when you breathe out, how much air can come out. So if you said like the ABCs all in one breath, when you get to Z and you're like out of breath, that's your vital capacity. And so a normal human has around 3,000 at my age vital capacity. And when you get to 900, you go on a ventilator. At my worst, and they would come in 3 times a day, and I'd have to like breathe into a tube. At my worst, I was at 1,100. So I had times where I would even call in the nurses and I'd be like, I'm having trouble breathing, and there were a few times where they'd like give me like breathing treatments and stuff to kind of help. And in those moments, I definitely had times where I was like, I could get to a point where I'd stop breathing. Like that's kind of scary. And I think I'm a very positive person, and so I think overall my family and like the people around me were more scared of the life and death situation than I was. I was almost like, yeah, I'm here laying, I can't move, but like God's got me. Like I'll be running in 3 months. So I was like, I'll be there. And my family would be like all nervous, and my boyfriend especially would be like looking up all the like rates of like mortality and stuff. And I'm like, nah, it's all good. We'll just joke around and hang out in the hospital room and watch some soccer. It's all fine. So there were definitely times where I was like, oh my goodness, like this is serious. Like I can't really breathe and I can't use my body. But I think I had so much trust that like, and because I knew the disease has like a bell curve, like so it has like the attacking phase, which is like 4 weeks or so, and then it levels off, and then you don't really have it anymore. So I would like look at the weeks, and I'm like, we're already on week 3. I'll make it to the end of this, and then it's gonna be uphill from here. So I think more of it was I know I'm gonna make it through this, as opposed to what will it look like if I don't.
Yeah. So you talk about I've heard from other people the joy that you kind of carried throughout this process, and like people being surprised by it, but also you mentioning just your faith and your belief. It's like, hey, like I trust God, like I have faith in Him. That obviously doesn't just like, you know, one day like boom, you have this joy and you have this faith and you have this trust. So take us before this. How was that instilled into you for this moment, right? Because you didn't expect this. It wasn't like you planned for this. But what did it look like before for this to be instilled into you?
It's a good question. I never had like a big aha moment in my faith journey. I grew up in a family that was like lukewarm Catholic. We went to church Sundays, and I did like the weekday church class kind of thing. And it was very like tradition, rules. When I got to college, I joined a campus ministry, and that was, they were not Catholic affiliated, they were Assemblies of God affiliated, and so I kind of went from organs and rules and sit, stand, all of that, to like live band and people raising their hands, and I was like, what the heck is going on? Like, and in that, I went kind of personally, my growth went from this is how you do things, kind of like the rules and tradition, to here's what it looks like to have a personal relationship with God. And from there, it was a lot more of me building that personal relationship with God, just studying scripture, being in small groups. I think community has been huge all throughout my spiritual growth, from that campus ministry, and then every time I've moved a few times in my life, I've had kind of this pattern of God challenges me to step out, and then I have like this time where I'm like, okay, this is kind of hard, and then He like teaches me something, and each time I've put community at the forefront. Like, I'm like, all right, I'm moving to a new place. Step 1 is move into my house. Step 2 is find a church and find a community. And I think that is the thing, community, that has helped me in building my faith and building my joy, because one of the huge things in the hospital that had me have that joy was that I wasn't focused on being alone and being sad in a hospital bed. I was getting all these messages and all these people visiting, and so it was easy to have joy when you're just seeing the people around you. And even like when I would get messages, I would be like, oh my goodness, I haven't talked to that person in years, and they're replying, and it was almost this experience of like, wow, look at all of the people that I've connected with and all of the people that I've touched in these points up to this point in my life. And it was just very easy to have joy.
Wow.
I'm curious, because you had mentioned, before all this happened, like your biggest fear was being stuck in a bed with a feeding tube. And, hearing Brett share about just how surprised people were by the joy that you experienced. I'm curious, how surprised were you? Like, finding yourself in this situation where, like, this is your worst nightmare, and you're in it, Were you surprised by how the experience kind of played out based on, what you maybe had pictured it to be?
Yeah, I think it was very interesting. When the nurse first came in and told me that I would need a feeding tube, because at that point I hadn't ate like real food in like a week and a half. So they were like, we need to get some nutrition in you. So she came in, she told me that I was going to get a feeding tube, and she left, and I just like wept, and I was like, I could just not eat. I don't have to eat. It's fine. I was like, we'll be okay for a couple more days, right? And for like the first day, I was just like miserable. I was like this is the worst. And it just like, you like feel it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was not fun. And over time, like it became like, from like, oh my goodness, this is the worst thing that's happened to me and I feel it and all this, to like, it went to the back of my mind because there was all the other things kind of going on. And I think for me, it was cool to see, like, there were like the moments that I said of fear and panic. Like, I wasn't just joy all the time. That's not.
I'm about to say that would mean you're not human.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But looking at the situation, and like the times that I cried were almost 100% like tears of joy, because I was like, oh my gosh, look at all of these people coming around me. And to see, like, I could be in this horrible situation and still, like, 80% of my day is joking with the nurses and hanging out with people. It's very encouraging to see, like, there's nothing that's gonna steal that joy.
Yeah.
Like, I always say that happiness is an emotion, but joy is a choice. And like, that's what I got to do. I got to choose that in tough situations.
Yeah, it's good. And even like when you talk about your journey, like even before this moment, your faith and your relationship with Jesus, it's also something that was cultivated in you over time. Like that is an aspect or a fruit of your relationship with Jesus, and it showed in the most difficult moments of your life. And that's not something you can conjure up in the moment. Like, oh, I'm going to conjure this up. It's like, no, you actually, it was cultivated in relationship with Jesus, and then it was shown in the moment where for the world looking in, that should not be there. That joy should not be present in that moment. Now, so obviously, like, you're not still there.
Yes.
So what happened? And even, I mean, let's start talking about like the miracle that is you here now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It has been a miraculous process to watch. While I was in the hospital, kind of going on that decline, the doctors said I would be using assistive devices for up to 12 months, and they were like, there's a chance that you'll never fully recover. And I was like, okay, I'll have like my little walking sticks and I'll be all right. And like I said before, I like outdoor stuff. Like I go to the gym. I like sports. So I was like, oh my goodness, like for at least a year I won't be doing that, but potentially longer. And my healing was so quick. I got to the hospital December 4th, left the 22nd, so a few days before Christmas, and then I was in rehab, acute rehab, for another 2 weeks. I left there January 3rd, so about a month.
Wow.
Went from kind of collapsing, not really being able to walk, to being bedridden, not even able to like get up to go to the bathroom because my body didn't work, and then going into a wheelchair, using a walker. And when I walked out of acute rehab, I was using like hiking poles as walking sticks. My PT was like, these look a little bit younger than the walker. I was like,
yeah. Definitely cool.
I was like, good.
Yeah.
I was like, maybe people just think I'm sporty.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah. And then from there, I was in outpatient PT for another 3 weeks or so. So by the end of January, I was walking without my walking sticks. And so in my mind, I'm like, wow, this has been so quick. They told me 12 months, like it's been 2. Like, and I actually just had a follow-up visit with my doctor on Monday, one of my neurologists, and it it was cool to like see me think that it was miraculous, but when I saw him on Monday, he was like, for someone with a mild case, it's makes sense for them to recover and get to like full healing. He was like, but for you, someone who is basically like quadriplegic, and to see how you've recovered, his exact words were like, that's remarkable. And I was like, wow, coming from like a medical professional.
Yeah.
And I remember when they were telling me the 12 months, I was like, give me 3. I got Jesus.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
And he did it in 2. So
Yeah.
it's been really cool to just see that healing.
Yeah. Wow. How does your faith look different? Like, is there like a particular thing about your faith and relationship with Jesus that has been most like affected or changed or shifted by what you experienced?
Yeah, I think the biggest change is just looking at life almost differently. I think from an experience like that, it's kind of one of the things we always say in church is when you become a believer, you like die to yourself and then you are born again. And I almost feel that in a new way of like I could have been dead. Like I didn't get to that like a point of really being in like that exact life and death, but I almost look at it as like God carried me through that, gave me this story so that I can be a testimony. And so now after going through that, I've always been the person who's like, I will not go on a stage. I'm not like even like podcasts. I'm like, I would never. And after this experience, I'm like, well, how could I not share all that God has done?
Mm-hmm.
And it almost brings a new meaning to like living my life for Him.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's so good.
I happen to know I was up at the UVA for other reasons during your stay, visiting Lauren and Ethan, and Renly was there, and it was obviously really touch and go there for that like first week or so. So I was up there I think on a Tuesday, and I kept hearing them talk about this Emily, and it like my ears perk up because that's my name. So I'm like, okay. So I'm listening in, and they're talking about this girl who's goes to Waymaker, and she's in the floor, like one floor down, receiving care, and she's decided she's just going to spend her nights praying for Renly because everybody leaves, and there's not I guess the distractions of visitors and everything, and so listening now, hearing your side of everything, I am just really touched by how this discipline of choosing joy instead of choosing to either feel or focus on the fear. I'm sure you felt fear, but you chose not to focus and dwell there, or just feeling sorry for yourself, but like you actively chose joy. And I just wonder how that played into just how you were primed to step into a really unique ministry of prayer over Renly while you were stuck in a hospital bed.
Yeah, I don't know. I had trouble sleeping in the hospital because there's a lot of beeping, and I'm in pain from like the nerves and stuff like that. So most nights I wouldn't get a lot of sleep, and I was like, well, I'm literally just laying here with either the TV on or like trying to. But nights go by way longer when you're not sleeping. When you go to sleep, you're like blink and it's morning. I would like look at the time and I'd be like, okay, the visitors left and they'll be back in like 8 hours. And so it was kind of a choice of when I heard that Renly was coming, and I know the Millers well. And I was like, well, they're all going home. Like, I know what it's like to watch all your visitors go home. And obviously, Renly doesn't necessarily have that awareness of like, oh, all the people are leaving, but I was still like, I'm literally, she's above me and like that way by like 2 rooms. And I was like, why not like pray over her and like be in that rather than being in fear and stuff like that. And it was easy decision.
I mean, you say easy, but like I think, there is this, even just the normal mundane aspects of life, okay, which most people listening to this are probably not going to experience something to your degree, but I think what we learn from it is what you choose, as you were saying earlier, like to focus on, and even like to focus and fill your time with, right? And so I've heard, there's 3 things that I've heard, right? It's like, first of all, like worship, like where music is the vehicle in which truth and praise and adoration fills my heart, my mind, my soul. Second thing, community, like where you got to experience like the manifestation of God's love and his presence and his peace through his people, which is it's a gift. And then prayer. So like I could fill my time, I could focus on a lot of it. I'm just gonna pray. I'm gonna intercede on behalf of others. And like we don't have to be in a dire state as you were to actually daily say, hey, I'm going to focus and fill my time with these things. Because, and this is a common theme, we've had other people who've had maybe difficult or even traumatic moments where it's like, we don't know when those are going to come, but when they do come, they will oftentimes will know what has been cultivated in our soul, in our mind, in our emotions. They will rise to the surface. And I think that's what I like. What I hear from you is like, man, what you focus and fill your time with is so vital. So, what, for someone that is or probably won't experience something like you experienced, all the things you've learned, and as you reflect back, what do you say to them, especially those that are like, hey, I want to follow Jesus. I want to live on purpose. I want to maybe help other people with my story. What do you say to them just as the culminating, like, this is what I've learned from this past season?
Yeah, I think most of us won't experience like physical paralysis or going through this experience, but I think we all have moments in time in our lives where we'll go in those valleys, and it could be a little thing or it could be a big thing, like, and I think the most important thing that I learned is being kind of that back work of like steadfast and building the community and building the personal faith beforehand, so that you don't know when it's going to happen or if it's going to happen, but when it does, you're prepared. And you have, like, because I had community, when I got into a spot where I had to fight, I already had my army behind me. And I think that is the big piece, is like kind of preparing, knowing that that day could come when we least expect it. And then I think the second thing is we don't get to choose like when stuff happens, but we always get to choose how we respond. And I think that was a big thing for me. Like nobody would have thought any different of me if I was just grumpy for a month and
totally
like crying all day. They would have been like, oh, of course, like she's laying in a bed paralyzed. But that wasn't my experience. I instead was having my friends come in and I'd be like, oh, how was work today? And they're like, what do you mean how was work today? you're laying in a bed. I'm like, well, I want to hear about your life too. And like I'd have nurses come in and I'd be telling them jokes about HIPAA, and they would come back like, they would be like, oh, I requested to be on your service again. Like, you're the best. And I know that those moments, like nurses weren't requesting to come back because they were like, oh, Emily's great. They were requesting to come back because they were like, oh, I see Jesus and I want to be near that. And
there it is.
so I think the big choice that we have is not when stuff happens, like that's going to happen and we don't really get to choose that, but we get to choose how we respond and how we show love and Jesus to others.
Wow. Emily, you got any more questions? Or
I was just going to comment on just the preparation. Like you kept on saying, like, we don't know when or if this is going to happen to us, but, we do these things so that we can be prepared. But I'm just struck by, like, how good our God is, that even in the preparation, like, there's so much fruit there. Like, it's not just hard work, but like we get blessed by community in the process of it, and then we have that to fall back on. And it's we call it discipline because we have to kind of structure it into our lives. It doesn't just happen, but there's so much goodness in it too that we don't deserve, but God gives that to us as a gift, and I'm grateful for that generosity and to know, like, He's built this in a way where, like, we're supported in the good times and the bad. Yeah,
almost like He tells us to do these things, but it's not like begrudgingly, like, oh gosh, like, we gotta do these things because we have to, and that's even getting back to the ideas like the rules and we gotta do all this stuff. But there's actually, it's like, no, Jesus shows it's a better way of being human and living. Like, there's actually it's for your benefit. You will receive something from it, which oftentimes is just His presence and His goodness and His love and all the good stuff. So I do want to close by this, Emily, and just kind of honoring you. And, well, one, thanks for doing this. Like you said, you never thought you'd and would or want to do something like this. But there's just two things, as we have been talking, that I just want to kind of honor you with or thank you for. The first thing is because of your testimony, like, not just going through it and how you went through it, but then also you opening your mouth and just when the chances arise in both the one-on-one conversations you have with someone or in open settings, because you've shared your testimony, like, people's faith it's been built. Like, people's faith in God's goodness, in His sovereignty, and in His power have been built because of your testimony. And that's a, man, what a beautiful thing, right? You want to talk about, like, ministry, like, that is ministry. People's faith has been built. The second thing I kept thinking of or seeing is, as you're talking, we read in Scripture about that we are to be a light, right? That, like, in this world that is dark, and especially in the hospital where there is probably a tangible, like, physical darkness that you could probably feel just of the sadness and the despair and the death and that kind of stuff. Like, we are to be a light wherever we go. That it's actually this lighthouse where people can look to and say, yes, like, there's Jesus, like, yes. And I just I see that in your life so much, and want to say thank you for being that example. And I know that more ministry will come because, when we read Scripture, we hear about, like, wine or like oil, right? Those things come through the pressing, and, like, there's something that is produced, this beautiful olive oil or this wine. And I just believe that for your life moving forward, that's really cool ministry will continue to be produced because of the difficult times that you went through. So yeah, I want to honor you with that, and thank you so much for being on with us today.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.